On 11 January 1962, Mandela left South Africa. Now, there are many videos that get the facts wrong on why Nelson Mandela left the country. Mandela was not escaping the apartheid government. He was not running away. In fact, Nelson Mandela was doing the opposite. The only reason Mandela left South Africa was because he was preparing for something big. Something that took him all the way to London. In total, Nelson Mandela traveled to 12 different countries in preparation. Mandela's mission was to get support for the ANC and receive military training for Umkhonto and Sizwe. Mandela's big preparation was war with the apartheid government. I am going to talk about why Nelson Mandela was chosen to leave the country, where he went, and at the end, I will tell you the most important thing Nelson Mandela returned with in South Africa. So I'm gonna start here. On December 1961, the ANC had received an invitation from the Pan-African movement, what we now call the African Union. This invitation was to take place in Addis Ababa in February of 1962. The goal of this conference was to empower liberation movements across the African continent. The ANC then asked Mandela, who was underground and leading the armed resistance against the apartheid government, to attend the conference to gain support, money, and military training from the African continent. At first, Mandela felt conflicted. He had made a public promise to not leave the country, but stay and fight the apartheid regime within. However, Mandela understood how important the conference was. If there was to be a war, the ANC and the MK, Umkhonto and Sizwe, would need the support of the other African countries. With this in mind, Mandela decided to go, and his mission was clear: to gain political and economic support for the liberation movement and to get as much countries as possible to agree to train his military force. Nelson Mandela packed his bags and left his wife Winnie and children. He took on a new name of David Matsamoy, and for the first time in his life, he left the South African borders through the country of Botswana, now known as Botswana. From Botswana, he went to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where he met Julius Nyerere, a leader of the Tanzania Liberation Movement. From Tanzania, he then moved to Sudan. Remember, Mandela was traveling through all these countries without a passport. The only document he had was an unofficial document from the Tanzanian government. And yet, Mandela was able to travel across the continent like he was a citizen of these countries. From Sudan, Mandela then flew to Accra, Ghana, where he met up with political colleagues, including Oliver Tambo. From Ghana, he flew to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Mandela took the stage after the Emperor of Ethiopia had opened the conference. You see, the African countries had little information on South African affairs, and so they let Mandela go first. In his speech, Mandela spoke about the ANC history and how the Umkhonto and Sizwe was started. He had made an impression on this conference, and after this success, Mandela moved on to Egypt, seeking the support of the second largest army in Africa. The Egyptian president offered military training and gave Mandela 5,000 pounds for weapons. Mandela then went to Morocco, where he met freedom fighters that came from all parts of the continent. He even spent time with the Algerian army near the Algerian border. From Morocco, he then flew to the Mali capital, and from Mali, he went to Guinea. From Guinea, Mandela then went to Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, Mandela attended a conference where he was mistakenly identified as the ANC president, who had won the Nobel Peace Prize a year before. From Sierra Leone, Mandela then went to Liberia, where the president gave Mandela $5,000 for weapons money, and incredibly, he gave him $400 for pocket money. After here, Mandela then returned to Ghana, where he was called back to Guinea by the Minister of Guinea. While he was in Guinea, Mandela was then given a signed copy of the Minister of Guinea's book and a suitcase filled with Guinean currency. After this, Mandela then took a fishing boat into Dakar, Senegal, where he spoke with the president on military training. The Senegalese government didn't give Mandela anything, but they did pay for his next trip, his trip to London, England. Mandela spent 10 days undercover in London. This time was used to speak to political figures, both Africans and British. He even spent time studying books on warfare. After his time in London, Mandela returned to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia for 6 months of military training. If he was gonna lead a revolution, Mandela needed not only study warfare, but he also needed to participate in training of war. The time for books was over. Practical exercise had begun. Mandela shot rifles and pistols and was taught how to make and avoid landmines and bombs. In just 8 weeks, Mandela trained and lived like a soldier until he received a message from the ANC calling him back to South Africa. Mandela had left South Africa with a packed bag from his wife. He now returned with over $10,000 in cash, offers for support and training from multiple countries, and a gift he had received from an Ethiopian general, a pistol with 200 rounds of bullets. Thanks to the African continent, the lawyer was now a general.